Welcome to Fridays at the 5th. We're so excited to be back again. It is the first week of, this is the first day of May. We made it to May, everybody. Isn't that exciting?
Yes.
I'll give it a few more minutes while people log on. Where's everybody logging on from? Let us know in the chat. You see anybody familiar in there, Faye?
Yeah, we got some usual suspects in here. People love Fiddler. I feel like Dane and Giuseppe are like Fiddler fans. Did you guys do Fiddler recently or something? Because you're like always talking about Fiddler in the Roof. No,
Fiddler's
no
a great.
shade. I love Fiddler, but you know.
It's a classic. Oh, but we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. My name is Orlando Morales. I use he, him pronouns. I am the Director of Education and Engagement here at the Fifth Avenue Theater. And today I am also joined by...
Hi, I'm Faith. I'm the Engagement and Education Assistant at the Fifth Avenue, and I use she, her pronouns.
Amazing. As usual, Faith will be functioning as our stage manager today, fielding your questions as best we can in the time we have together. Before we get really started, let's remember that the Fifth Avenue Theater is on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish, and we honor and we thank them. I'm also hoping that we can invoke their memory as we continue to negotiate this period of uncertainty and cultivate the resilience of all of our ancestors as we move forward. Every week we are joined by a couple of amazing teen panelists. Teen panelists, who are you? Where are you at? Tell me about y'all. Are you muted?
Hi.
Hey, there you are.
Hi, I'm Kennedy. I use she, her pronouns, and I go to Holy Names.
Awesome.
And I'm Esteban. I use he, him pronouns, and I go to Skyline High School.
Cool. Thank you so much for joining us. These two amazing student performers are here to act as liaisons for all y'all out there in the ether. But know that we are also looking out for your questions, dropping them in the chat and the Q&A. Our guest artist today, I am very excited about. This is the multifaceted, the magnanimous, the magnificent Nathaniel Tenenbaum.
Hey, thanks.
Nathaniel Tenenbaum, who hails all the way from London, England, but is now a full-fledged Seattleite. Local regional credits include Indecent at Seattle Rep, Urinetown, which was a co-pro between the Fifth and ACT, and was fantastic.
Thank you.
Annie at the Fifth, Dreamgirls at the Village Theater, The Pillowman, Boing Boing, Rent, The Toxic Adventure.
Okay.
All right, keep it. He's also performed regionally at the Hippodrome Theater and the Phoenix Theater outside of Seattle. His online presence has included stint as a viral Viner, as well as star and co-creator of the acclaimed web series Kissing Walls.
Everybody gets tired. Everybody gets tired. But specifically today, I'm just tired of you. Everybody gets tired. What? You're gonna go forward with the divorce. You've watched Clueless for the 13th time, and now you bought a Jeep Wrangler. You got the job in San Francisco. Yes! I wanna be the cream of the crop, sit home, all the rage, blazing high in the spots in the stage, yeah. I bring yourself into the bad side. I had to take myself from me right. You know the smile, don't wait, Lord, that's the I'm gonna
You better sing.
Okay,
Come on now.
Wait, I have not seen that. I have not watched that.
It's on the internet, dude. Nathaniel Tenenbaum, thank you so much for joining us Fridays at the 5th. We're excited to have you. Amazing. Hey, do you have to sing that high note every night?
Yeah, it's in my mix, so it doesn't even touch my vocal cords.
Oh, okay, amazing. Well,
You know that.
speaking
You've
of
been
high
like my
notes,
music director for like a couple things.
yeah. Well, I'm just trying to segue us to talking about high notes.
Oh, okay.
So yeah. So as a way of getting to know all of our panelists, we asked everybody each week to share a high note from this past week, something that has brought us joy or hope while under quarantine. So we're about to do that, and as usual, Faith, can you kick us off?
Yes. Okay. Let me tell you guys, I have been looking forward to Fridays the 5th every week. It is my joy and my pride. And my roommates always wonder, like, what are those strange noises that are coming out of your room? And those noises of excitement and delight. And so I was thinking to Orlando the other day, I wanted to kind of meet everybody because we've been talking, it's been 7 weeks now. We're kind of close. And I was like, well, we can't obviously get together IRL, but we might be able to meet people individually. So my high note this week is that I created a little formy form, and I will link to it in the chat. If you would like to be featured on Fridays the 5th, come on up on video, and then we can meet you. Then you can fill out this little bitty form. I tried to make it fun. There's some regular straightforward questions, and there's also like some musical theater nerd questions. So get ready and submit. And I will contact you if you submit, because I will get your responses, and then maybe you can come over to meet us, or we can meet you.
Amazing.
Well, he's fully doing it. Okay.
I'm sorry. It's not me. It's Stephen Sondheim.
Oh,
I think that's great. And
happy 90th.
amazing, right? Okay, so we're really looking forward to featuring some of our watchers, listeners, Zoomers. I'm not really sure what our audience members in future. So please go ahead and drop us that info. And Faith, thank you for your high note, I love that your high note is all y'all who have been joining us. You know who else has a high note? Esteban. I know you got a high note. Tell us a little bit about what you've been up to.
So lately, I've just been watching lots of movies and analyzing them and trying to get a better sense of acting styles that I can later use on in life. So lately, I've been watching a lot of. I've watched The Shape of Water. I watched Isle of Dogs. My personal favorite is Synecdoche, New York, and that's just brought me a lot of joy and brought me a lot of distraction during these, hard times. And this guy makes incredible videos. His name is Carson Runquist on YouTube, and he makes incredible video essays, rankings, and just several lists for movies for you to watch. This is his quarantine video, so if you get the chance and are bored and want to watch the movies, I highly recommend him.
Cool. Awesome.
Great
I'll
film.
check that out.
Synecdoche,
Ooh,
New
the
York.
fair.
It's a great film.
Ooh, the farewell. Oh, Synecdoche. Yeah, I like that film too. I'm gonna talk about my high note, which came from the Stephen Sondheim 90th birthday celebration, and it was one of my all-time favorite musical theater performers, Lea Salonga, who performed "Loving You" from Passions. This was actually kind of a cool little concert because of social distancing. It was pretty much a series of videos that some amazing performers put together, and that was of them singing Stephen Sondheim pieces. And so it was a concert. Lea's my girl. This is how I got into musical theater. My parents are from the Philippines, and so they were super into exposing me to her work when I was young. And the fun thing that happened too was like a couple days, I think, before the Stephen Sondheim concert, she also did like a duet on a Filipino TV show that is where they sing some musical theater songs. And so we'll put this up in the show notes because it's also an amazing performance. So y'all can check that out. And let's go ahead and kick it over to Kennedy for your high note.
Okay, so my mom and I have watched On My Block for the past 2 seasons, and we just got around to finishing the 3rd season.
Oh, it's so good.
It was amazing and sad and happy and all of the things that I would expect. But yeah, it was really good. Highly recommend if you haven't seen it. Yeah, I enjoyed it. So.
I also love this show. I love the portrayals of the students as kind of whole people, complicated, nuanced characters. I think a lot of the shows that are about like the hood or students who have to live adjacent to, inner city issues like gang violence, they can be kind of one-dimensional. And I really appreciate this show. So thanks for bringing that up. Has anybody else seen this on the panel? Oh yeah, y'all got to check it out. It's great. Yeah. Okay, so we got one more high note. Nathaniel, bring us home. Tell us about yours. Look at that.
Gotta catch them all. Okay, so I just recently got a Switch. They're really difficult to find now because we're all in the house and so people want them. But I recently got my hands on one. I'm right there right now. Oh, that's so funny. So that area that you're looking at is called the Wild. And yeah, I am playing it nonstop and I love it. That's my high note.
I'll toss it over to Faith.
Unmute. Da-na-na-na. All right.
It's still not making noise. While Faith gets her, yeah.
No?
I will say thank you. Just Nathaniel, we haven't, that's our first video game that has been on our high note, and so I totally appreciate
That's
that.
true.
Yeah,
Can you hear you yet,
No?
Faith?
Can you hear me? No?
yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I'll read your lines and you keep trying to troubleshoot that. This is live, y'all. This is how it goes. So as you know, Fridays at the Fifth is a program dedicated to bringing together students who want to learn more about the craft of musical theater. Whether you're just curious about or deeply passionate about musicals, we want to empower the next generations by giving y'all a chance to interact with theater professionals who have dedicated their lives to this work. So that's what we're about to do. Even though we can't all be in the same rooms together, to our student audience, please don't be shy about dropping your questions about theater life in the Q&A box down there. And heads up, we do love to call on questions that start with the word how, such as, how do you connect with other actors on stage? Kind of the theme for this week. Before we get started with that conversation, though, I thought it would be fun to kick things off with a little warm-up, which we've never done before. And so this will be a little bit of an experiment. But this is one of my favorite warm-ups to do before our musical theater workshops here at the Fifth. And we'll talk a little bit about why after this is all done. So this warm-up is all about connecting with a scene partner. The game is for you to improvise a conversation with another person, but to start each of your sentences with a word that begins with the last letter of the last word in your partner's sentence. I know that's so confusing. I'm going to say that in another way. So you're going to have a conversation with another person. You're going to listen real carefully to their sentence. And whatever the last word is, you're going to note what the last letter is. So if I was playing with Faith, do we hear you yet?
I truly feel like you are the only one who cannot hear me.
Can anybody
Yeah, I can
hear Faith?
but yeah, we all can.
Am I the only one that can't hear Faith?
Yeah,
Once again.
he's the only one that can hear Faith.
That's so weird. Okay, wait. Okay, I'm just gonna watch your lips. And this is gonna be great. Okay, so if the sentence is, Faith, I can't hear you.
Oh God, what starts with you? Understand that you are the only one that cannot hear me.
Even
Well,
the
this-
chat can hear you, Orlando.
There we go. All right, all right, so something, E must have been the last letter. Okay, so we got the game here. So why don't we have Esteban? Why don't you kick us off?
It is really cold in my house. Did you not get that? Did you not hear that?
Yeah, I think Nathaniel. Go.
Everybody's temperatures are at different levels. So that would mean someone would need to say something after.
Yeah. I was gonna let Kennedy go. This is going really well because this is supposed to be like a really free-flowing conversation. It's totally happening.
Sometimes
Okay, what was the last?
outside, I like to sunbathe.
Everybody? Yeah? Sunbathing?
Gonna say 100% love sunbathing.
Oh my gosh, I heard that.
Congratulations. Oh,
Sorry, no, I broke the rules. Okay. All right, so we're gonna start this again. We'll start another round. Now I can hear Faith. That's amazing. Okay, so Kennedy, why don't you kick us off?
Okay. I love Mario Kart.
Totally, Mario Kart is the best game, especially the Nintendo 64 version from when I was growing up.
Possibly would disagree with that, but sure.
Every once in a while I play Mario Kart. It is maybe the only video game that I can semi-play.
You know, my favorite character to play as was always Princess Peach.
We did it! Okay, that was great! Okay, cool. So, that again, I'll reiterate, that's like, congratulations, everybody. Thank you for playing along. Again, that's one of my favorite warm-ups. And student panelists, why do you think that's one of my favorites? I guess anybody.
I still think they think we're playing the game. You can start with
Oh no, we're not. Right? Yeah. Well, I know usually, just speaking as from my own point of view, sometimes I have a hard time listening to other people. I just know that about myself. Sometimes I get distracted by like music that's going on, or like even just like thinking about what I'm gonna say next. In a weird way, that's just something about me. Is like I'm just like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna say next? And that's not even when we're like, if we're performing in a play. And I'm not an actor, but I can imagine you literally have to know what you're about to say next. But even in real life, I'm just like, okay, so what am I gonna say next? And so sometimes that prevents me from listening to the end of another person's sentence. So that's why I really love this warm up. When another teacher shared it with me, I was like, this is a really great way to force myself to really have to listen to the end of the sentence and to react to what I was hearing.
Yeah,
as opposed to like planning it
the
out.
chat was saying, because it really makes you listen to what someone is saying. It's not just like, all right, I am imagining what I'm going to say next, and not really hearing you.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I see in terms of feedback from like our high school awards adjudicators that go out is like the two characters did not connect, or like there was a lack of connection between these people, and that's interesting. It's like I think what they're getting at is that an actor or a young performer is just simply acting and not responding to what their scene partners are doing. But I do kind of get tripped up on that word connect. Is like, y'all need to connect. You just connect with the other person, because that could be such a nebulous term depending on what your definition or how you understand that. So I'm wondering, Nathaniel, if you ever got that feedback, you're like, I need you to connect more with your scene partner. Like, what do you get from that, and how do you understand that kind of comment or that kind of thinking?
I think the term itself is nebulaic in a way, but when you tap into it, it's like universal. Like you know instinctively when you are connecting with someone in a scene. That's not something I don't think needs to be explained. Like you can, if you're thinking about, for me personally, if I'm thinking about what my next line is in the scene, I can safely say that I'm not very connected to my scene partner in the moment. And that's dangerous because, for example, in a show like Indecent, there's a scene directly after the opening scene where we're all in the parlor, and it gets pretty heated. And sometimes certain actors that their performance in that scene, it ebbs and flows. So they might start off at a 4 and by the middle of the scene be at like a 10 and then back down to a 4 and then back to a 3 again on one night. And then maybe another night they might start at a 10, they might come in hot and then like ease down to prove their point and change tactics and move up. But me saying that is that the architecture of that scene changes so rapidly that if they start at a 10 and you start at a 10 as well, like there's nowhere for that scene to go. So it's totally fine if they start at a 10, but if you're listening and responding spontaneously, you'll be able to navigate that and balance it out. Maybe start at a 5 and bring it back up, because like rarely will you see a 10 wherever, unless you're doing noises off, where everybody's at a 10 all the time. But
you mean emotionally, like what, 5 and 10, like?
it could be. It depends. It truly depends on the delivery of the actor, because you could deliver a scene at a 10 and have that be an internal 10, or have it be an overt 10, like it's obvious that you're at a 10. But it just truly depends on who you're working with in the scene and how they feel that day. Maybe they brought something from outside on stage and they're a little bit preoccupied, and like you have to pay attention so that it is a team sport and the scene tells the story in the best possible way that it can, night to night. That's what I think of when I think of like listening.
And was that always easy for you? Like, was that something that you always were able to do naturally when you know, started getting into this? Or do you remember a time when you're like, oh yeah, this is what I'm supposed to be doing?
Yes, 100%. My vice when I first started acting was had like this terrible imposter syndrome, because I started fairly late. Like I started acting about 7 years ago. And so I would be in my head about that, especially with like shows that I feel like I hadn't gone to university for this, and I hadn't done like countless amounts of auditions since I was like 7. I wasn't a part of, what do they call it at Village? What is it? At Village?
Kid stage?
First stage, kid stage. Yeah, kid stage.
Yeah.
I'm not one of those kids. I haven't been around theater all my life at all. I'm a film guy, like hardcore film guy. And so I would get in my head completely, and I would be thinking about like, what's my tell on stage? How is everybody going to know that I am the one without a degree in this? And so it distracted me completely from the scene. And I think eventually I got tired of picking up the slack, or like joining the scene rather late, or getting notes about like you said, Nathan, we lost you for a minute there. Like, for somebody that's as much of a perfectionist as I am, like that little note in a scene that I've been working on a ton will level me because I am so particular about the nuances of scenes that I'm doing, and it's just word for me to go back to the drawing board and make sure that it's like completely seamless. I get from this thought to that thought to that thought to the end of the scene seamlessly.
Yeah. Well, since you brought it up, you studied psychology, if I understand correct, if I remember correctly, right? Like clinical psychology at like Oxford, and then a master's degree in like social psychology at UPenn or something like that, right? Like that's very impressive, right? And I'm wondering if, yeah, come on, just own it. I'm wondering if your background in psychology, you know, do you think that that gave you any kind of insight into like what this job is, like kind of gives you an approach or
The two ways that it benefits me is for me operating myself as I guess an LLC or a business, because that's how I'm viewing like when I go into auditions and all that kind of stuff. It is a packaged brand that I'm bringing to this audition. I see a spot for what I can do well in this show, so I'm going to go in and do it. I think, I don't know. It just varies. It varies for me from audition to audition. But if I do see a spot in there, I go in there and I try and present myself to the best of the abilities that I have. That could be a benefit to the show. Or sometimes I've gone into a show and I've not necessarily seen a place for me. And that's kind of where you trust the casting directors, where you go, I wouldn't normally be in a show like this. Like, believe it or not, I've done so much Neil Simon, and there are just not a ton of like of color characters in Neil Simon's work, but I've played a ton. I'm also Jewish, so culturally I get the work very well, which allows me to be able to play those characters, but there just isn't a lot of visibility for characters of color in Neil Simon's work, but I've gotten the opportunity to because life experience that I've had, or life experiences that anybody watching may have, may give you that like slight edge in an audition room or with specific material. I feel like I didn't answer that question right, but I ended up here.
I think, yeah, but it's still fascinating. Was there, I one like so many things. Do was there, if you're comfortable talking about it, what kind of brought you into the world of theater? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a very neurotic theatrical child. So there is there's always been a draw for me to do this, but I always felt like I had to do it on my like own terms. I was also like, I'm Jewish, but there was a stint in me being raised where we were Jehovah's Witnesses as well. And so that doesn't really allow for a lot of like extracurricular things. My parents were very like, um, either go to university to become a lawyer or a physician. Like those are the things that you do. You focus on this. My dad's Cuban and he came over to America in the 70s. And so it was very much you find something that can keep you sustained here. So I kind of didn't really do theater. That's like the reason why I didn't do theater at all for a while. But my parents relocated to Arizona briefly just because my dad had arthritis and the winters in Arizona were better than the ones in England and Philadelphia. But there I met a friend of mine and I didn't have a lot of friends there. And she was really in the theater. And I was like, oh, I want to see what you do at theater. And this is what, like 7 years ago in Arizona. And she had a friend named Zach who I was very interested in at the time. And he ate, slept, and breathed musical theater. And so, you know, you do the thing where you're like trying to hang out with this person specifically so you learn all about what they're doing and all that kind of stuff. And then as I was learning about it, the sad thing about it is that he loved musical theater so much but was completely tone deaf. And then they had auditions for a musical called Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. I had no idea what that musical was at all. And she was like, you should audition. And I was just like, I don't know. And so I talked to Zach and he goes, yeah, you should audition. Use this chorus from Rent. And I was just like, oh, is that like the minute song, the five, whatever. So I went in, no sheet music, nothing. And I sang the chorus from Rent. And he was just like, it's okay, they'll post the cast list and nobody really ever gets in on their first show. And I did with the lead. So I've just kind of been picking it up. Like from that moment, I was like picking it up. But like I told you, I've been watching TV and film like weirdly since I was a child. I would sit at the television and just like rewind a scene. And internally, I would just be searching for the thing that made me believe that scene as a child, that made me believe that character was a real person. Esteban talked about it, like he's trying to figure out how to make that adjustment from stage to film. And at a young age, I was trying to find and differentiate what those styles were every time I watched a film. Like I used to watch Murder, She Wrote repeatedly, and it's a very I'm a diehard fan. I can like verbatim quote a few episodes, like line from line. But I was a diehard fan, and all I've done since I was a kid, I was a latchkey kid, so I was like coming home alone from school by myself. But I would watch those episodes, and I'd be like, man, why is everybody so angry in the scene? And I would go back and like try and figure out where it was that tipped off the whole cast in that room to be angry. And once you figure out those like little tips and tricks, you can implement them in scenes where it's the same thing with like riffs and runs for me. Like I listen to a ton of music, and when you hear a chord, I don't know how to read sheet music, but I have a pretty good ear. But when you hear a chord that's similar to like a riff and run that you do, you can just like adapt it to that kind of thing. So I do the same thing with like acting. Like this scene is very similar to this scene. I wonder how I can craft something out of both of these like schools of knowledge. I feel like I answered amazing. That one on topic.
Yeah, I like also how you said like you have a kind of good. He has an excellent ear. Hey, so hey Kennedy or Esteban, I want to give you some space to ask a question if you have one as well. Let's see who unmutes first.
I have a question. So I wanted to know if well, I'm trying to pick which question. Okay, I'll ask this question. So has there ever been an instance when you are acting with a scene partner or a prominent scene partner and your outside relationship isn't like, has there been an instance where the outside relationship doesn't benefit your acting relationship per se, where it floods into your acting characters? And if so, how do you find a solution to where you don't let the outside relationship affect your in-character relationship? If that makes any sense.
Wow, who put you up to this? Is it Sarah Rose Davis? Did you put you up to this? Funny thing, not really. Because I mean, I try, because like you don't want to poop where you work, and so I try and go into work and create an environment and have an environment where that can't seep over into it, because we're there to tell the stories of these characters. And this Polish Jewish man in 1928 doesn't have beef with Sarah Rose Davis on stage. So why would he have a problem? Well, I don't know why I'm picking Sarah Rose Davis. I love her so much. I don't know why I'm picking her. Nick Hagan. So this character doesn't have any beef with Nick Hagan on stage. So why would he ever bring that on stage? You know what I mean? Like, at all. So I think you just you try and remember what you're there for. You're there to tell a story, and if it doesn't serve it, you got to get rid of it ultimately. But I think if it did ever come up, I would probably try and find a way to use it. I love, if a new emotion comes up in the scene, you work with it. You work with it and you trust your instincts, and if you remember that you're trying to stay grounded and keep this character true, you'll be surprised. Use it. Don't go crazy though, but use it. Don't go crazy.
Thank you.
Y'all might have seen Nick Hagan as, I think, Franz was the character name. Rock of Ages. Yeah.
He was amazing.
Amen. Kennedy, do you have a question for Nathaniel?
Actually. I was just wondering, I'm like kind of somebody who personally has to like really like know that person really well for like a scene partner to kind of really like get into it, if that makes sense. So like, do you feel like you really have to know that person or like really have a good relationship to like get into it and like connect well? And also like, how would you do that if you like didn't know the other person and you just automatically are like friends in a scene or something like that?
It does help. It does help having a relationship with the person that you know you're going to be in a scene with. Unfortunately, you don't get the opportunity to know that. Plus side, when you go in for auditions and stuff like that, it's very rarely an opportunity where you're like bumping into someone that you'd be like, oh, I really don't know who you are, and this is a very intense scene, and it's going to make me very awkward. Very rarely. Casting directors are very good about picking people that just would be able to just like add to the room being comfortable and warm, so you could yourself do your best work. But I think if you are in a situation where you do know that the person you're going to do a scene with, like in university or something like that, I wouldn't be like, why don't you get coffee and like talk about the scene that you're going to be working on together, talk about their angle on the scene, talk about their take on the scene, because then that'll give you a clue on and watch their mannerisms when you do go out to coffee, like, because those mannerisms will be replicated in that scene, I'm telling you. So if you watch those very closely, you'll have somewhat of like a cute little cheat sheet, so you can know, oh, I noticed that they do this thing when they get upset, and I could, like, if they scratch their temple and it's like an argument, you can like move with consent, like move the hand out, like don't scratch your head, like, and just stay in the scene. Like, that gives you little things that you can make that scene realistic if you do the homework. And it's usually not as scary if you set up like a little, hey, let's get together and talk about what this scene's going to be. They do that on set too. It's called intimacy coaching.
Yeah. You had said something about observation that I was like, oh, that's a psychology. This is a psychologist right there. It's very. I've heard other actors talk about, that power of observation, or that observational muscle, something to cultivate, something to like to keep working on, because that is a really useful tool. Almost scientific Faith, do you have any Q&A, interesting Q&A questions out there that we can
lay it on us?
Do I ever? Also keep them coming, guys. These are great. So I have the squeakiest chair in the world. Okay, so how much danger is there? This is from Dane. How much danger is there in being able to do your show without thinking about it? How much does that affect your ability to connect? So my guess is like, how much, is there danger in sort of going on autopilot? But also I would add to this, is it helpful? Are there things that come along with being able to do the show so naturally that help with connecting on stage?
That's a great question, Dane. There are two sides to that. Like, there's the difference between autopilot and the show being in like your bones. I would say strive for the second, because that's where anytime I'm watching anything, spontaneity. And Sophia Franzella's watching this, and she's really good at that. I've seen her in a couple things, and the spontaneity that she presents on stage is exemplary. And that's because the show, I'm not speaking towards your process at all, Sophia, but I'm just guessing, but the show is in her bones so much that you can just listen. You're not thinking about where you are in the page. And that's so important, especially for like British farce. And she's amazing at that. But like, you absolutely have to have the show in your bones. Now, I can also speak to autopilot. During Indecent, for a hot second, I thought about what I was going to get from Metropolitan Market once we finished the show. And I looked up from that scene and everyone was like, and I said, and I had to think in my brain of a quick way to make it seem like I was acting that entire time silently. And that pause was warranted. Didn't pull it off. And that's why it should be in your bones rather than autopilot. I hope that helped, Dane. I think just get it in your bones, and it's good. It's good when you get into your bones, because then you can play, and that's what we do, I think.
Right, and you can sort of really watch what other people are doing, as opposed to having to think, what am I doing next?
Yep. And that's what we're here for. We love a surprise guest. We love it. We love it.
Surprise guest! Yeah. Did you want to speak to this issue?
Please.
Okay, can I be completely honest? I muted you to go to the bathroom, and then I came back and I heard my name, and then I got very nervous. But I'm honored my name came up, and what I will infer is that we were talking about preparation and how it is key for success on stage. Cool. I completely agree with that. I'm actually someone who studied the Meisner Technique. I don't know if anyone is familiar with it. It's really cool. A lot of it is about listening and responding in the moment. And I really believe, and Sanford Meisner believed this too, the only way to really be able to respond honestly and truthfully in the moment is if you know your text like back of your hand, and you're able to actually listen and respond to the current situation, not the one that's in your head planned, but the one that's happening, what your partner is giving you. So big advocate for that.
That's it.
Amazing. Hey, thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for letting me join. This has been really amazing to watch. Sorry I missed the one part where I went to the bathroom.
Don't worry about it. Everybody's got to pee.
Bye, Sophia. Faith, do you have another Q&A question for us?
That is so funny that Sophia was just talking about the Meisner Technique. We had a question from Julia about the Meisner Technique and asking if Nathaniel, if you use it at all, how does it help you?
In a way, I do use it, but like I don't use it by the title. But exactly everything that Sophia said is what I strive to do in a scene, 100%. I actually just ordered a book of the Meisner Technique online to try and like quarantine improvement, human capital improvement.
Then I will add this one here. So someone said, how can you leave what's going on in your life outside the door before when you're coming into the theater, especially when, things are crazy?
Sorry, could you
maybe we'll pause. So we'll just pause that for a second, because we just had like a Meisner expert like join the panel.
Wow, expert is a generous title, I think, but I did study it.
Do you have a few words of advice for our student audience in connecting with other performers on stage?
Absolutely. I mean,
or do you want to address the beef that Nathaniel is talking about?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I don't know what we're talking about. I felt thrown under a bus. But I mean, everything that Nathaniel's been talking about thus far essentially is the Meisner technique. He's absolutely right. And one of my instructors in college often use the example, the distinction between like listening and just autopilot of like, perhaps your line is "I love you," but like if you're in a scene and someone's like screaming at you, it doesn't necessarily make sense to just be like, "I love you," you know, like that those are incongruous. And so, you know, your line might be "I love you," but like in the heat of the moment, if someone's screaming at you, then like your response is to just scream right back, emotionally, or like whatever makes sense within the realm of the show. You know, and your brain might be like, but it says "I love you," so like I assumed that it was this tender moment, but it like we say things that don't align with what we actually mean all of the time. Like our words and our emotions often diverge, and so it's all about like using the text as a framework, but using the people as what fills it out. And so in that moment, you might be saying "I love you," but like you're in the middle of a fight, and then that sparks the next thing, and then you just kind of ride this roller coaster of like what Nathaniel was talking about earlier, of like knowing the show in your bones and understanding that like because of the thing that you have rehearsed and because of the structure of the play and the professionalism of the people you're on stage with, you will get to that end point, no problem. And so it's just about like playing this match of ping pong where you are like hitting the things back and like using the lines as your paddle, but like the ball is emotionally what's happening between the two people. Long-winded.
No, it's great. It's so interesting. I think this is frequent feedback that we have for students that we work with about, what is the thing that you as a human would be doing in response in this moment? I think is what you're speaking to. So yeah, thank you. Oh my gosh, Nick Hagan, thanks for stopping by. Do you have anything to say about your relationship with Nathaniel Tenenbaum on stage?
We'll have some words after this, I guess.
All right, that sounds great.
Nick Hagan, everyone! Nick Hagan!
Thanks, Nick. All right. So, Faith, let's go ahead and... we stepped on that question. I blame Nick Hagan. It's all his fault. But that question that we stepped on, let's get back to it, shall we?
Oh, yeah. Well, we're just talking about, like, how you can... And I know people have talked about this on Fridays of the 5th in the past as well, but just what is something that you do, Nathaniel, when life is sort of crazy? Like, how do you shut that out? Like, how do you shut the metropolitan market sort of stuff out of your brain? You're coming into the theater.
Yeah, it's important. Theater has always kind of been like an escapism for me. I kind of get excited about being able to like not, because I overthink everything, like everything. And there's usually, because I'm not in a show or I'm not attempting to be real as someone else, my thoughts, I can't keep my thoughts away from just being in my head the entire time. So if I have like a script or a scene or a show to do, I get an opportunity to just like not. And it's sometimes in those scenes, like I've come off stage out of a scene once and gone, oh, why don't I just do that? And it just took me like focusing on something completely different, like the show, that'll give me an opportunity to just rest for a minute, because you get in your head and you're too close to the thing and you're in it over and over and over again, whether it be metropolitan market or whether it be like bills or whatever, or like applications to something or an audition. But it really is all tied. If you know the show in your bones, that character will buoy to the top and it'll just be the only thing that's left on stage. And you don't even have to think about it. You don't even have to think about, okay, now I have to think about this and not this. You've done the work, it's in your body, you get on stage, which is the world that you're living in, and it just takes over. That is that is the key to know that you have done the sufficient amount of work to bring that character to life, is that as soon as you put the costume on, as soon as you put the clothes of that character on, rather, and you get onto that stage, into that world, what's a phone? What's a cell phone? Like, I'm not trying to be like method or anything like that, but like, it's so easy for that stuff to just let go of it. There's not many times where we as adults get the opportunity to play, I guess. I hate using that word. It's like, come play with, like, but you know what I mean? Like, it's very few opportunities that we get to be completely immersed, whether outside of like it being a book or a video game or a film, that we get to actually like live as these people. And it's not exciting for all, but it's very exciting for some. And if you are one of those some, it will fall off of you no problem, and you'll be able to transition very well.
Kennedy, I think you had a question.
Yes. I was just wondering how, or like, what are kind of some techniques that you use to kind of separate yourself from the character that you're playing, or kind of like get more into the character? Because I know, like, personally, I'll be on stage and I'll be like, I guess my character might do that, but I don't really want to do that. So it's kind of like, how exactly would you go about doing that?
So funny, because here's the thing. Net market is fantastic. Sorry, I was reading like the comments. But for example, that clip that you saw of me and Dreamgirls, have you seen the film, Kennedy? The one with Beyonce and Eddie Murphy and all that kind of stuff. So you know how Eddie Murphy behaves in that film. Right. That is not Nathan unless he knows you very well. Like, I think the people that get to see that is like Lauren Dupree, Alexandria Henderson, like those are like Brandon O'Neill. But like those are the people that, like Eric Ankrum too, like they get to see that version of Nathan. So it was difficult for me to bring like just that much of my personality that I reserve for people that I'm closest to on stage. And I think I had to have like a one-on-one with myself, like Issa Rae, like in the mirror of like, okay, these people are expecting Eddie Murphy, and Nathan, you don't have to be Eddie Murphy. You hear me? You don't have to be Eddie Murphy, but what you do need to do is to bring the energy. Can you do that? Can you imagine that these people on stage with you are just like 12,000 Lauren Dupree's, and you guys are just kikiing in the living room listening to some album? Can you just bring that reality to the scene? And I have to have, like, if a character is not instinctively me, I have to have that conversation with myself. You're not losing yourself. You're not pretending to be someone else. Like, this is a facet of who you are as a person, and all we're asking you to do, because I say we when I'm talking to myself, all of us inside of you, Nathan, are asking you to do right now is to turn that facet up. And I have to pep talk myself in that manner. Nobody's laughing at you. You're telling a story. It's not you. I know you would rather not. And a portion of it is just me being English and not really wanting to make an exhibition of myself. And that gets in my way as well. And I'm just like, but that's how I know that I have not had the text in my bones, is that if I'm hovering over the text like this and I'm like, Nathan wouldn't say that. Why am I even worrying about what Nathan would say with this character? You know what I mean? I haven't done the work enough yet. If that hasn't like congealed like that, and I'm still thinking about what the optics are from outside of me, like as Nathaniel, then I haven't done the work. And so the pep talks help me a lot, of just like remembering that I'm still in there and this is an important story that we're telling, and you have to be connected to the text and just allow yourself to just rest in that. It's a form of meditation, I guess, of just like connecting to your reality in order to be able to present another reality.
Yeah, I think no, it's great, but there's a lot that's being said, especially right now, about like how you talk to yourself, you know, and your self-talk, and having that as a tactic, as a routine, as a technique for being in a relationship with your acting, I think is really important. So what I heard that is like cultivate, you know, some self-talk that's going to set you up for success. And then also that learning your text, knowing your text, letting the text be your key to kind of unlocking what needs to happen. I think that's great. And what I also heard on the other side of that, your question, Kennedy, was a little bit about disconnecting. So we were talking about connecting with your character, but I think you might not have been asking this, but I was starting to think about like sometimes you need to be able to disconnect, you know, from your character. Like Esteban, I remember you played Bernardo last year, and that's like not you, you know, like you. And I don't know. Do you remember like even you as just a young actor struggling with having to disconnect from that character when the show was done, or you know, when rehearsals were through?
I know it was definitely hard to disconnect with the anger and violence that pursued, especially once we got into tech rehearsals and the shows themselves. Because once we got into tech rehearsals, and specifically because Bernardo has so much violence and anger and power and passion for what he does and his protecting, you know, with the Rumble scene specifically, the tech and the new elements with the knives brought so much newfound language and energy that me and Kaden Brosh, who played our riff, didn't experience before. It was new for us. And so being able to disconnect from that the moment we stepped off that stage for intermission was really difficult at first. I mean, what we would later find out was just talking with one another and kind of taking a moment to breathe and recollect ourselves, and then, you know, having a more humane moment with one another was really important for us to disassociate the anger and power that we were holding before, and just being two friends, two teenage guys who are just friends and just hanging out together, waiting for the curtain call. You know what I mean?
That's so true. That shift is so important because, like, going back to Indecent, like, there's a scene where me and the character are arguing about how he couldn't possibly write this play about these two lesbian Jewish women. Like, you cannot write this play, it'll look bad for all Jewish people. And we are yelling at each other, like yelling. And because there are no we do all the set changes and everything, there's nowhere to breathe. Like, and from that argument, we go straight from that argument into the sequence called Berlin, where I'm wearing like a police cap and a pink feather boa. And it's just like this completely different scene. But I would run from that argument and I would be standing next to put the boa on, and I'd be like shaking because we would literally be like screaming at each other about the fate of the Jewish culture and the optics on what we would look like coming over to America. And you're bringing that weight of an entire culture in a scene, and then you're slapping on a feather boa and like doing a high kick on stage. Like, that is exactly true, Esteban. Like, you have to check in, and it's not silly at all. Like, it's safeguarding your ability to navigate those emotions in that world and then come back unscathed.
Yeah. Esteban, did you also have a question? The last question before?
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I guess you kind of already touched upon this a little bit, but, and I guess it's kind of a preparation, but when you, after all the prep, after all like the rehearsing and getting connected with your text and whatnot, once you are in the, you know, show season, when you're actually performing and such, how do you personally prepare yourself mentally for those harder roles? You know, how do you get in that headspace and mindset, and yeah, how do you get in that headspace for you to be able to put on the mask that you need to put on? You know.
I think it would. I was in a play called The Pillow Man by Martin McDonough. That thing's so heavy. It's so heavy. I think when we did the first table read, I was like, I think I made a mistake. But the I had to find the strand of that character that was human. And it's not, sometimes it's very difficult. Like, it's very difficult in characters like, for example, you'll talk about that character from The Pillow Man, like similar to characters in like all the Joker characters seem to be going in that whole direction. And the key I find to playing characters that outwardly don't seem very relatable or easy to connect to, the decisions that they like. I played the rabbi in Indecent that got those actors put in prison, like my own people, like Jewish people that I probably would have known, maybe relatives and stuff like that. And I sent them back, and I had to deliver that sermon about why I called the cops on them to get arrested with such conviction, in belief that this is hurting us rather than helping us. And so in order for me to make that believable and compelling, I needed to find the reason why that rabbi thought it was such a bad thing for this story to be told for the community. So it helps in finding like that. There may not be many, that one strand of like, oh, I can kind of see what they were going for in reacting this way, and the way that they went about it wasn't ideal. But if you can find that strand, I guarantee you can find a realistic performance in something on paper seems so unrealistic.
Faith, we got
There is a
one
question that I do. There's a question in that Q&A that's like a really good one, but I don't want to.
Well, I'm hoping that I am able to suss out that this is the one you're thinking of. It's from Carmen.
Yes.
Talks about, where they talk about, what kind of pressure do you feel to replicate roles exactly like that other actors have brought to the role? How do you deal with that pressure? I feel like that is especially hard when you're in high school or doing any show and you've got that cast recording, right? And you're just like, well, Christian Chenoweth does it this way, so.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I have a very hard time. I have a very hard time with that because and it just piggybacks on me feeling like, oh, they're gonna know that I don't know what I'm doing because I'm just copying this person. But it just ties into like the self, like I'm telling you guys, before I was able to do like I worked with a director in town called Sheila Daniels, and how many minutes can I put my hand on my head like this? Maybe 2. She's great. Oh, she's great. And she really taught me how important it is to, when you hit a wall, don't keep trying to go deeper. It's okay to like, it's okay to go, actually that's incorrect. When you hit a wall, don't keep trying to go lateral. Like it's okay to just go deeper that way. Like if you're trying to expand and expand and expand and match something that's been done on TV or film, and you're just trying to make that thing as bigger and big as impossible, go the opposite way. Go deeper and bring them in to the story that you're telling in that moment. Believing that you have something to contribute, a specific facet that you bring with the essence of who you are to the text that's been done a million times. I'm sure every Glinda in Wicked is just like, or every Elphaba is just like, what is there to do? Like, what else could I possibly do that would make this exciting and just not another girl slapped in green paint on stage? But that's when you really do have to go internally and figure out what's different about this Elphaba? What's different about this Eddie Murphy performance? Like, what could be different about it? And that will kind of steer you in like a good direction to make something really your own. Great question, Carmen.
It was a great question. Dude, we could be asking you questions all weekend, and I would be happy
I told you
to
guys,
sit here.
Didn't I tell you? I was like, this is gonna breeze. It's gonna breeze.
We never have enough time for this. But thank you so much for answering our questions today and being here. And we wish we had a little bit more time, but we all got to get our weekend started. But before we go, I do want to plug one thing that is coming up next week. Oh, so actually, my friends, I have some bad news and some good news. So the bad news is we are taking a hiatus from Fridays at the 5th, just for 1 week, just for next week. But the good news is because we're just making some room on that day for the premiere of Rising Star Project's 10-minute musicals. So at 7 p.m. on May 8th and May 9th, the 5th Rising Star Project, in collaboration with KOW's Radioactive Youth Media, will be presenting. Yeah, that's right. So we're going to be presenting a 2-day festival of new musicals via Facebook Live, and this event will be the culmination of 8 months of collaboration between Rising Star Project teams working together to create, produce, and present these new works. So it's, you know, written and directed and produced by teams such as yourselves, and we're doing it all over Zoom, except we'll be on Facebook Live. I don't know how to explain that. But, so no Fridays at the 5th next week, but definitely please tune in to Rising Star Project's Radioactive Musicals on Friday, and on Saturday you'll get to see Kennedy in her star turn. So that's coming up. Thank you so much to our student panelists, Kennedy, Esteban, and to our friend and internet coolest cousin, Nathaniel Tenenbaum. Bro, I want to be like you when I just came up with it. Bro, I want to be like you when I grow up. And again, thank you all for joining us out there for Fridays at the 5th.
Sophia and Nathan. Or Sophia, not Nathan. Sophia and Nick.
I tried to change my virtual background, but I ended up changing, just muting. But yes, thank you, Nick, and thank you, Sophia, for crashing our party. That's the first time that's ever happened, and I hope that it is. Okay, so if you're
Esteban, take that down.
It's if you're Fridays. Okay, there it is. Okay. If you're into Fridays at the 5th, please consider supporting it. We're committed to offering this program for free, but there is a little bit of a cost associated, so please consider donating. Text 5th, 5TH to 56521 565. Oh, sorry. I'm going to say that again. I'm already messing this up. So 56512 is what it is to receive a link to donate. And we'll also put that in the show notes. We also want to shout out to all the schools who have been sending us in their amazing photos of their theater communities. We do want to premiere those or put those up in the future, so please keep shooting those to us. Kennedy, do you have a shout out before we sign off?
Yes, I do. I would just like to shout out my mom because, I mean, why not? Moms are just so great.
Mother's Day is coming up. Don't forget, y'all. Order your stuff now so it gets in on time, yeah? Okay. What about you, Esteban? You got a shout out?
I'll shout out my parents as well and my family, especially because my mom is listening in the other room. So...
Shout out to all the moms. Nathaniel, you want to shout out to your mom too, or you got another one?
She's good. I actually want to just thank all the people that I've dragged under the bus to be in the. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Sophia. Thank you, Lauren. She's fine. Actually, I'm taking that thank you from Lauren for that.
Well, amazing. And once again, thank you so much. Muchas gracias to all of you. Maraming salamat for kicking it with us. One day we'll be back in the theater, but together. But until then, keep washing those hands, stay safe, make art, keep on keeping on. Y'all can unmute, panelists, and say goodbye, and we'll see you all next week. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
No.
We'll see you next week at Rising Star Project, yeah?
All right. I can have you on.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, Dave, for all the questions.
You.
Won't forget you.
Peace. All right, take care, y'all.
Bye.